There's a moment that happens in silence. You're sitting across from someone, and something shifts in your chest. A tightness, a flicker of irritation you can't quite name. They haven't done anything wrong. Not really. Maybe they're just talking about something good that happened to them. Maybe they're happy. And yet, something in you pulls back. Something wants to diminish that happiness, to find the flaw, to say the thing that will bring them down just enough to match the temperature of your own inner weather. You don't act on it, not always. But you feel it. That small, dark impulse. And then you wonder, just for a second, what kind of person that makes you Arthur Schopenhauer spent most of his life thinking about that moment? Not because he was cruel, but because he was honest enough to admit what most of us try to ignore. We hurt people, not occasionally as exceptions to our better nature, but regularly as expressions of something fundamental in how we're built. And the reasons we hurt each other aren't as simple as anger or malice. They're stranger than that, deeper, more tangled into the machinery of what it means to be conscious in a body that wants things it can never fully have. Schopenhauer called it the will. Not willpower, not intention, but something closer to a biological hunger that operates beneath our thoughts. It's the force that makes your heart beat without asking permission. The thing that drives you toward pleasure and away from pain before you've had time to form an opinion about it. This will doesn't care about fairness or kindness. It cares about survival, about satisfaction, about getting what it needs. And here's the problem. Everyone else has one too. Your will and theirs exist in the same space, reaching for the same limited resources, attention, love, recognition. And when they collide, someone gets hurt, not because either of you is bad, but because the mathematics of desire don't allow everyone to win. Think about the last time you felt genuinely threatened, not physically, but psychologically. Someone questioned your competence at work. A friend succeeded in an area where you've been struggling. Your partner gave their attention to someone else for just a moment too long. What happened inside you? Probably something you'd be embarrassed to admit. A flash of resentment. A desire to protect yourself by making them smaller. You might have said something cutting disguised as a joke. Or maybe you just withdrew, made yourself cold and unavailable, punishing them with absence because you couldn't articulate the wound they'd opened. This is the will protecting itself. When someone else's gain feels like your loss, when their light makes your darkness more visible, the instinct isn't to celebrate them. The instinct is to restore balance by dimming their brightness just enough that you can breathe again. But Schopenhauer saw something else in this dynamic, something we rarely admit even to ourselves. We don't just hurt people in reaction to threat. Sometimes we hurt them because their suffering offers us something valuable, relief from our own. When you see someone else fail, stumble, lose what they had, something in you relaxes, not because you're sadistic, but because their pain proves you're not uniquely broken. It confirms that life is hard for everyone, that the struggle you're enduring in private is actually universal. There's a German word Schopenhauer would have known well. Schadenfreude, pleasure in another's misfortune. We treat it like a character flaw, something to be ashamed of. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just the mind's way of finding equilibrium in a world that constantly threatens to prove you're failing at being human. What makes this even more complicated is that we almost never see it happening. We have elaborate systems of self-deception that keep us from recognizing our own cruelty. When you criticize someone, you tell yourself you're just being honest. When you withhold affection, you call it setting boundaries. When you gossip about someone's failure, you frame it as concern. These aren't lies, exactly. They're translations. Your mind takes the raw truth of your behavior and converts it into something more acceptable, something that preserves your self-image as fundamentally good. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, that part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge because it contradicts the story we want to believe about who we are. The shadow doesn't go away just because you don't look at it. It just finds more subtle ways to express itself. Through sarcasm, through jokes that land like stones, through the 1,000 small ways you make others feel less than without ever raising your voice. Schopenhauer understood that this self-deception has roots in something even more fundamental. Our loneliness, not the circumstantial loneliness of being physically alone, but the existential kind. The unbridgeable gap between your inner experience and everyone else's. You know your pain with absolute clarity. Every disappointment, every humiliation, every moment of fear plays out in high definition inside your skull, but someone else's suffering? That's abstract, theoretical. You can imagine it, you can sympathize with it, but you can't feel it the way you feel your own. And because of that asymmetry, their pain simply doesn't weigh as much as yours. So when you're stressed and you snap at someone who didn't deserve it, you feel your stress as urgent and real. Their hurt feelings? Those register as secondary. Unfortunate, maybe, but not as important as the pressure you were under. This isn't conscious calculation. It's the natural result of being trapped inside a single point of view. Jean-Paul Sartre had his own dark insight about this. He wrote that hell is other people. Not because humans are inherently terrible, but because other people force us to see ourselves from the outside. They reflect back an image of who we are that often contradicts the image we carry inside. And that dissonance is unbearable. So we hurt them to restore our preferred story. If someone calls out your selfishness, it's easier to attack their credibility than to sit with the possibility that they're right. If someone's success implies criticism of your choices, it's tempting to find reasons why their success doesn't really count. We hurt people to protect the narrative we've built around ourselves, even when that narrative is paper thin. Does any of this mean we're doomed? That kindness is just a performance and cruelty is our natural state. Schopenhauer didn't think so, but his answer wasn't comforting. He believed compassion was possible, but only through a painful recognition that the person you're hurting is driven by the same blind forces driving you. They're not your enemy. They're your mirror. Their will is seeking satisfaction just as desperately as yours. And when you hurt them, you're not defeating an opponent. You're just adding more suffering to a world already drowning in it. Real compassion, for Schopenhauer, meant seeing through the illusion of separateness, recognizing that the boundary between you and them is thinner than you think. That their pain, even if you can't feel it directly, is just as real as yours. But here's what he didn't say, or maybe what he couldn't say. This recognition changes almost nothing. You'll still hurt people. You'll still choose your comfort over their feelings. When the cost of kindness gets too high, you'll still feel that small, dark satisfaction when someone who seemed to have it all together reveals a crack. Not always. Not in every moment. But regularly enough that you can't pretend it's an aberration. The question isn't whether you'll cause harm. The question is whether you'll notice, whether you'll sit with the discomfort of seeing yourself clearly instead of immediately reaching for justification. Maybe that's all Schopenhauer was really asking for. not perfection, not some impossible standard of selflessness, just awareness, the willingness to look at the machinery of your own mind without flinching, to admit that the person you hurt yesterday wasn't hurt by accident or misunderstanding, but by the same force that breathes your lungs and beats your heart. The will, doing what the will does, protecting itself, asserting itself, surviving, even when survival means someone else has to lose. You'll do it again, probably tomorrow, probably to someone you care about, and afterward, you'll feel that familiar combination of guilt and defensiveness, already crafting the story that makes it not quite your fault. But maybe, just maybe, there will be a moment before the story solidifies, a moment where you see it clearly, the hurt in their eyes, the choice you made, the truth beneath all the justifications. And in that moment, you'll have to decide. Do you look away, or do you stay with it? Do you let yourself feel what you've done, or do you bury it under another layer of self-deception? Schopenhauer can't make that choice for you. Neither can I. All we can do is point at the door and tell you what's on the other side. The rest is yours. Verfähigst. If this made you think deeply, make sure you like this video, share it, and subscribe for more.